All right. You hear me?
Hey, Colin. Hey, everyone.
Hey guys. So
I think you might be a little bit low on the volume. Or is that okay for everyone?
all right, let's try. I can try. How's that? That's probably a little better.
Much better.
Hello everybody. Welcome to our podcast. So the reason we decided to start this is we've kind of been just watching the world kind of from the sidelines. And some people were suggesting that we should, speak out a little bit more. But then, the question is like, well, what should we speak about, right? So we brainstormed a bit, and we from what we're realizing in the world, there's a lot of polarity, right? There's, I'm, pro this and I'm anti that, or, I'm left or I'm right, or, and what we want to do is we want to help people find that balance in between, right? And we decided to kind of do that through nourishment, right? And so what these podcasts are going to be about is they're meant to nourish, right? Nourish the mind, nourish the soul, because I think that's one of the best things that we can do for the world right now is to help people realize that everything's going to be okay, and we can do that through sharing different experiences that we've had, and the things that we've learned from those experiences, so that those gifts that we've received can be given to you as well, in hopes to maybe help improve the quality of your life, right? To make things better for you, like they've done for us, right? So the theme of this first podcast is the pursuit of happiness. So what we're going to be discussing is some of the mechanisms, the physics, we should say, of happiness and vibrations. And so we're going to be speaking, I guess to just clarify, like, my spirituality, right? This is going to be a new side of me that I haven't really shared with you guys too much, because I've just, for one, been waiting for the right timing, and two, I've been having my own insights to get to before I really felt like I was ready to share, right? But when this whole kind of materialized, we kind of came to the point of, oh, well, maybe this is a good time to do it, right? And this, it aims to provide that nourishment. So a clarity, and my spirituality is based off of experience, right? When people say, do you believe in God? I say, no, I experience God every day, right? I have direct experiences, and I test these things and I put them to the test. I don't just, read something and say, oh, wow, that's so cool. I believe that's true now. I put it to the test. I put it to practice, right? Beliefs are never truly yours until they're put into the fire, right? And a lot of people, you'll see spiritual people, new age people, they don't really believe, right? They're scared to put it in the fire because they're scared of those false beliefs to be burned away, right? And, for me, I was born in the fire. I guess that's one reason why I do what I do with Nexus, right? Because it's, bathing in fire. But, on the other side of it, that fire purifies and it puts away all of those things that are false. So, what's left of me now is, what's not been burnt away, what I've found, to be true within myself. And so some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today are going to be kind of centered around direct experience. We're going to share things that we've tested out and found through just going through a lot of difficulties, right? Beliefs ready to be transformed show their way through the shadows. So understanding some of these, shadows helps us to understand and read the circumstance to help, tune ourselves, right? Because everything's kind of just like a symphony. We're all in tune with one another. They're all vibrating, right? And you have to have these notes in tune with one another, just like the piano right over there. If it wasn't in tune, it wouldn't sound very good. So, being in tune, we experience that dissonance is a type of despair, fear. These are indicators, right, that we're holding on to these false beliefs, these false imprints, right? And so when you can learn to start to look in those shadows, right, and look at these different aspects of yourself that are elucidated to you, instead of trying to push them away, right, or trying to find a remedy, trying to, like escape them, right, we face them and we ask them what they are there to teach us, what they are there to show us. And when we do that, we learn new things about ourselves that bring us closer to our truer resonance, which results in happiness, right? Happiness really in the nutshell is not who you are, what you have, and what you do, but it's how you feel about who you are, what you have, and what you do. You could see somebody that richest person, most powerful one in the world, right? And they're empty inside. They have no friends, they have nobody that they know that they love. They've gotten rid of their family because they put their work first, right? And they live in this state of dissonance and emptiness, and they're trying to fill that with more things, and they think that it's, it's having this girl or this car or this house or these things, and so many people then holding on to that belief, which is false, by the way, will then think they have to get the car or the house or the girl to be happy, right? And so they'll go do things in their lives that make them unhappy, to try to reach that, right, is like a means to an end. But it just keeps making the hole deeper, right? It keeps taking us further and further away, because happiness is a state of resonance, right? Joy is the experience of a type of resonance where your mind is resonating with your spirit, your heart, right? They're in tune with one another. Because if you think about things, they're like planes, right? Like, let's start with dimensions, right? A single point, the word, right? That's your first dimension. That's the vibration, right? It has no direction, it has no shape, it's just a point. And then you do an association, right? That creates the line, okay? But still, that's single dimensional. It has no direction. It's just a line, right? So it can contain more information. And then you add in the next dimension, and now it has direction, right? You have 2 dimensions, and so on and so forth to 3. So, spirituality to me is just understanding dimensions and understanding, think of, let's just say God, for lack of better words, is like a sphere, and we live in a 2-dimensional world, and so therefore we can only receive a cross section of that sphere at a time, right, over a period of time. And so multidimensional objects take a lot longer to fully understand, and that's part of the spiritual pursuit, right? It seems mystical, but it's really just dimensional physics. Just like on the square piece of paper, you got squares and triangles and circles, and they're all doing their thing, and then all of a sudden a dot appears. The dot came from, and then the dot turns into a line, and it gets longer and longer and longer. They say, oh my gosh, look, mystical, like it must be God, it must be the creator, it must be something, like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And then it gets bigger and bigger, and then it starts shrinking, getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and then poof, it's gone. And then they make up legends about it, and it's some savior, it's some what, but really it's just a sphere that happened to pass through their plane, and they experienced a cross section of it through their experience of time, right? So it's not mystical, it's just dimensions. And so when you take that idea and you extrapolate it out, you move up a dimension, think about, our 3-dimensional reality into 4 and then 5 and then 6, right? Those types of things are what create, the idea of mystical experience. It's just a multidimensional experience intersecting with this specific space-time coordinate, right? So the reason I'm saying that is because that's kind of how I see, what's beyond, right? It's just different dimensions. So, then you have planes within that. So they're kind of like layers of an onion. Okay. So, just like dimensions you can kind of see as like an octave, and then, the notes within that are like the planes, right? So you have the astral plane, right? So the spiritual planes where we go when we die, right? We move to a higher plane, which is just less dense, right? And the mind is that membrane between the two, right? So everything's filtered through the mind down here, and we experience ourselves through that. So the reason I went on this tangent to tell you guys this is because if your mind is out of tune, right, if it's thinking things that are incorrect, then you're going to be receiving things that are be a dissonant of who we are. And when you experience that dissonance, there's going to be fear, it's going to be despair, it's going to be depression. It can be anger, like all of these emotions that we are always trying to escape, right? But the irony with them is that when we try to escape them, they get stronger. We can never escape them. They're messengers, right? They'll take on the form of a monster if you don't listen, because their goal is ultimately to get your attention. So when we can learn to look at those, then they don't have to turn into monsters. We can just simply look in the shadow. So, the beliefs, the false beliefs that we think about ourselves, we experience that as fear. So when you go into, a moment where you're finding, you're afraid of this happening, you're afraid to talk to this person because you're afraid of rejection or whatever, just stop for a minute and ask yourself, what is it that I'm afraid of? And usually that leads to something else. I'm afraid of being rejected. Why are you afraid of being rejected? I'm afraid of being rejected because, I'm afraid of not being good enough. And I'm afraid of not being good enough because I'm afraid of not being worthy, and so on and so forth, right? And then you get to that core false belief, right? Usually it comes down to some sense of self-worth, right? And once you recognize that, it's gone, right? The fear says, okay, sign here. You got your package. See you later. Bye-bye. But if we say, no, go away, fear, don't come, it's going to start knocking louder. Knock, 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 knock. Be like, no, go away. And it's going to get louder and louder. And then it's going to turn to a monster, and it's going to go, fee, fi, fo, fum, and it's going to break down your door. And it's going to grab you by the neck and say, I got a message for you. And that's where we create this like really negative experience of fear, right? That's what you could consider like a panic attack, right? And it just gets bigger and bigger. And then we try to run away from it. But that doesn't get rid of it, because it's there to serve a purpose. And when you understand its purpose, you understand the mechanism, you understand the physics, right? Then you can work with that in order to elevate yourself. And then fear becomes a friend, right? It just becomes an indicator. And same with joy. You say, okay, well, if this brings me excitement and brings me joy, that's something that's more synchronized with who I am. And that therefore makes you feel better about who you are, what you have, and what you do, right? It changes your experience of things. So that gives you this ultimate power, though, because then it doesn't matter where you are. When you can master that concept, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you have, or anything. You can be happy anywhere, no matter if you're being beat, no matter if you're being torn, or anything, and that's a state of consciousness that's very difficult to achieve, but it's achieved through that process of just understanding and listening to these messages and how they're communicated to us, right? And that's really the root of happiness. It's just a state of resonance, right? And the root of fear, the same, and a lot of people are afraid these days. A lot of people are afraid because we've been told we're something that we're not. Think about it, Tash. Like, we live this life where we're told, no, you can't trust people. You can't love people. Like, no, you're going to get screwed. Nice people finish last, which, is true. Like, nice people do, because nice people can't say no. It's kindness, that comes from the heart, right? And a lot of people don't know the difference, right? But, ultimately, like, we're fed this false image of ourselves, right? Think about it when you're a child. You want to love, and you want to play, and you want to have fun, and you're pure, and your enthusiasm for life is just overpouring. Everything is just so incredible. And then we're taught the world is this way. It's dark, it's empty, it's cold, there's radiation in space, like you can't go anywhere, you gotta work, death and taxes, the only sure things you're gonna get in life, right? And so, what do you expect that to do? It's false, right? So it's gonna make us all feel fear, especially when we believe it, it's the belief in it that really kills us, right? And that's, it's a big problem. It's a big contributor, to our lack of happiness, right? So, that's part of like what's happening in this time, right? That's the reason we named this the Age of Aquarius podcast, right? Like, we just like to be really clear here. We don't like New Age people. We're not New Age at all. I think that's a very lost movement. But I do study, the way the stars move, constellations, the planets, and everything. And, there is a common cycle that's been known by many ancient civilizations for thousands of years. You could debate why it happens, right? The ancient Indians actually said it was because we're in a binary solar system where you have this rotating, right? And so our solar system moves in a circle of its own, which would cause the equinoctial star to change every 2,000 years, right? That's what the ancient yogis of India said. And, depending on your sources, some people have said they've seen two suns, some haven't. There's a lot of NASA information about, Planet X. A lot of people talk about it, it's very well known. It's this planet that mysteriously appeared in our solar system. Who knows, right? But what we do know is that this equinoctial star changes the constellation that it's pointing at, right? And what's happening right now is we're moving from Pisces, the Piscean age, into the Aquarian age, right? And so if you've ever seen Hair, I'm sure you guys have seen that, from the 60s, dawning of the age of Aquarius, right? That was really like a big burst of that Aquarian energy, like coming out in the 60s. There's just people everywhere having fun, playing music, enjoying life, sitting in hot springs, like starting communities, like Xing out of the system, right? Just driving, for money and more and conquest and domination. They were seeking something new, right? And these ages kind of have a cusp, right? They kind of blend together. So, this Aquarian age is about a 200-year cusp, I'd say. And there was a conjunction, which I don't know if you guys remember seeing that on December 21st of 2020. It was a great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, 0.1 degrees apart and at 1 degree Aquarius, right? And that was kind of a tipping point into this, new kind of energy. And an age is kind of just like a theme, and, since everything's vibrating, everything influences itself. Gravitational fields actually act instantaneously on other objects. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but, in order for it to orbit, it can't have a velocity, because the object would fly out, right? So gravity actually acts instantaneously. So there's a lot of really interesting, properties of gravitational forces that we don't fully understand yet, right? But one thing that's very apparent that we've seen time and time again is that there's these ages that change, right? And we're going into that right now. And that's one reason why we're seeing this destabilization of the world, right? But on the other side of it, there's this incredible revival happening. I'm seeing so many people are waking up, and so many people are, finding out what's really important. They're focusing on their family, they're working on getting gardens, they're working on being sovereign, right? And this kind of ties in with the decentralized technology too. That's just really exploding everywhere because people need it. We've had enough of this corrupt power systems that exist, and yes, corruption does exist. I've faced plenty of it, from pharma to many other things. I've had to take on a lot to protect Nexus. And so I know, I've like I said, we base these things off of direct experience, and, it exists, and that's one reason why we built Nexus, to help protect against that, to make it decentralized, to reduce that power, because, as they say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, that's, why we're doing this, right? And so, the world is going through a big change, a really big change, and, it needs that, and I think people are starting to kind of recognize who we are, right? You can say it as much as you want that people, aren't trusting and loving, but look at a child. Okay, what is a child? They're trusting and they're loving and they're open, right? That's our nature, right? We've lost that nature. That's why so many people are taken advantage of, because they've trusted governments, so they've trusted the wrong people, right? And they've loved the wrong people. We all have those stories. I'm sure everybody has a few to wear on their arm, right? And it's just, that's our nature. So in order for us to be happy, right, we need to accept our nature. But in order to accept our nature, we also have to find places that are, safe to do that, right? Like you got to trust the correct people, right? And, that's where like a big part of, correcting some of this like collective dissonance that we have, this, because the system's designed for, sociopaths to win. Sociopaths make the best CEOs. Everybody knows that. If you look at the data, it's there. Because they don't have empathy. They don't need empathy. It makes them stronger in business because they can dominate more, right? And that's kind of just a natural state. People aren't built that way. And, a lot of people have, just trying to keep up in that world, have had to, not have as much empathy for certain things, or had to be, tough on certain things, because it's just like what we've had to do to survive, and that's another part of like what makes it difficult for us to be really truly happy, in this day and age, in this world, because we're constantly fighting this dissonance, right? There's these false beliefs being projected upon us, right? But that's part of the challenge and the joy of the challenge, right? And in the midst of the fire, right? If you're able to get to that state of consciousness, then you can go through anything. You can be anywhere, right? So now is a really unique opportunity for us to put these beliefs to the fire. And I've seen a lot of people in 2020 that were supposed to be, somewhat open-minded and stuff, do yoga and then mask on, it's happened to so many. And it's this the fire that we're in right now, right? So we don't really get this type of fire to come around very often. So, it would be wise to utilize it, see, where it brings you, and help you kind of get to a higher state of consciousness, which really ultimately brings you to a greater state of joy. A higher vibration is joy. That's joy, excitement, right? Because when you're resonating, it's going to increase the vibration. When you have dissonance, it's going to constantly be destructive wave interference, and they're going to fight each other, right? And that's what's happening right now, is everything's fighting each other, right? So that's one reason, and also that we wanted to really do this podcast, is just hopefully we take things out of the revolution, which is the circling, to the revelation, right? Take it to a higher octave and bring it out, bring it out of this recycling pattern. Because there's so many people being this conspiracy and this, and I'm not denying that there's not corruption out there, but it still is kind of polarizing, because there's still some people that they're always fighting, and we want to find that way to help neutralize that, right? And bring people together. And I think that's really what we need right now, is, we need to come together, and, the world needs love, and the world needs community, right? And that's going to bring us happiness, right? Because that's more of who we truly are, right? And that's being true to that, makes you more true to that vibration, and, that excites and resonates, right? And then so many more beautiful things come from that. You got anything to add?
That's Josh? So well said, Colin. And I think of the Age of Aquarius, I think of it as, we're all on a journey in this life, and we're all, trying to find the truth within ourselves. And the irony there is that, there is no ultimate truth in terms of, being polarized one direction or another. It's that life is all polarities integrated together, and yep. If we just kind of break down happiness, we start with life and evolution, and our evolution, every species evolution, the evolution of the planet, of anything, is really just this movement of creation, and it's iterative creation. And if you look at unhappiness, it's where we get stuck, where we're not moving and creating. And because we get stuck, we get polarized. We think, our belief is right and the other belief is wrong. And if you trace that back, to when you're a child, you have these direct experiences, you fall down, you learn this or that, people hurt you. You have indirect experiences that come from your teachers, education institutions, religious institutions, the television and the media, all of these are inputs. And then all these inputs, whether they're direct or indirect, create this mindset, this belief structure that you have. And then you walk around through life and you're like, okay, this is my belief. And anything that has a polar opposite to your belief, you defend. You're trying to defend against anything that's opposite to your belief. And so then you try to go around and you control life, you control your friends, your family, your environment, to try to protect you from encountering those polarities. And so you never get to integrate the two polarities of any given situation. And evolution naturally is the integration of that and moving on to the next moment, and integration of that and moving on to the next moment. So you wonder why you have these repeat patterns over and over and over in your life, because you get stuck in these beliefs and defending them, and then they just act out in new storylines. And I think that what this time of chaos is showing us is it's pushing us to look inside. And that's really the Age of Aquarius, in my mind, is trying to understand our own selves so that we can come out of our shell, that we can be more loving and accepting of other people. And there's this whole, when we talk about like new age, and I've been down that path where you can't, you're not connecting to the reality on the ground in practical terms. And so that's why a lot of people are turned off by the concept of new age. But if you really step back and you think about a lot of the concepts, they are really have practical and grounded implications. It's just that people don't explain. They view it kind of like your sphere passing through the plane, this mystical energy. But if you look at it in terms of how it actually acts itself out, like you bring up the topic of happiness, and I would associate that with the concept of love. And love is so misunderstood because people think of it as, oh, you're just you're loving other people, and it's kind of foo-foo, right? But this whole concept of love on a very practical sense is very, very powerful, because just think of evolution as this movement, this creative movement of the universe, right? It's creating in all directions around us. And then you say, well, if it's creating kind of like a sun and all these lights are beaming out, there are certain things that are blocking some of those rays. And it's, the controlling other people who are stuck in those belief structures that are trying to control other people. Well, love is just the allowance to be free and to create. That's all it is. It's the open door that you provide for other people to be who they are, as opposed to entrenching yourself, in these polarities and trying to defend and say you're right and the other person's wrong. And once you integrate the two, you can then step back and say, oh, well, I choose this particular path or this particular position, but I don't have to do it. I understand that no matter what choice happens, if we all go tomorrow, that the universe itself is all that is, whether we like it or not. And in a very practical level, we can say all wrong paths lead to something that wouldn't otherwise be possible. You think about every, quote, bad thing that happened to you in your life, it led down a branch of paths that led you to where you are today. And all the good things that followed that may never have come into your periphery had you not gone through those situations. So it's taking a different view on life and pulling ourselves out of this negativity. It's so easy for me and others to get caught in this polarity and this negativity of all the stuff that's going on. But a lot of times you can change your perspective and say, okay, well, look at all the controls and things that are going on in society. And then you say, well, the other angle is it's actually driving this decentralized movement away from authoritative figures and controls. And it's making people think about their, oh, well, maybe I should, get into gardening and look at my own, food and how I provide that. And maybe I should, move away from the banking system or even politics altogether. You're looking at left and right, and people are starting to see that that's kind of a game. And you can actually pull back from these hierarchies, and you can put your trust and your love into yourself, and you can empower yourself. And that's really propagating all over the place now. So people are like, decentralization is going to come. And they had this vision like, okay, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is just going to like, bam, it's going to all change into decentralized. And we're seeing like all these centralized systems encroach on that. But I don't think we see that it's just not coming in the way we thought it would come. It's actually coming through all of these strong controls, because it's giving us the impetus to go and pull back and say, hey, we don't need these roads and gates that we have to go through to empower ourselves. And I say this road and gate theory, like, if you want to do something and you have access to whatever you think is divine or whatever you're trying to achieve, even in practical terms in life, think about it. If you have to go through a road, meaning that someone's telling you, you need to go this way and then that way, and you need to go step A, B, C in order to get to D, right? That is a control that's trying to shape your creative evolution. Like, you no longer can create in any direction. You're being told you have to go one direction. And then the gate is authority figures. They could be religious institutions. They can be, anything you can think that says you have to pass through this. It could be, what it could be anything. You have to go through this government body or this in order to get to where you are. Those are two things that stifle your ability to create and be a free human being. So once you recognize that and you kind of step back and you start just working on yourself and your beliefs and integrating those polarities, then the world opens up and then you begin to flow. And a lot of people say, well, what about, if you're in these negative situations, what do you do? And I want to use one example here that my wife pointed out to me is that, one time we were not rafting, we were floating down a river in inner tubes, and we went over this small waterfall, and she got caught underwater, and we were all stopped and trying to get back to the water, but it was too powerful to go pull her out, and she couldn't get out. And she said she was struggling, and finally she thought, well, I'm going to die. And she let go. And the moment she let go, she popped out. A path was created. Yeah. So, when you get out of the polarity and you think, how are we ever going to navigate through all this chaos and all these controls and all this stuff going on in society? Go. And, when you flow, like that's the whole idea behind the Tao, is to flow with the universe in order to create a way for you to create and continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, on the comment of the darkness, right? It's very necessary. It's important. Every seed, right? It won't germinate in the light. It needs to be in the darkness. The womb, you're in the darkness. Life starts in the darkness, right? And we come out and we push through that. We go through that struggle, like, a chicken hatching in an egg. And, this egg, is hard. And if you actually help this chicken out of this egg when it's hatching, it's going to die. It's not going to be strong enough. It needs that struggle, right? That struggle is how it gains its strength, right? And look at the world right now, what's happening, that's the eggshell, that's the dark that we're struggling through, right? To let go of, right? And, the other aspect of it too is that, when opposites are carried to the extreme, they become alike, right? If we're in absolute light, you're blind. If you're in absolute dark, you're blind. Right? You get the same result as you polarize, right? And then, think about, the analogy as Tash was saying about the sun shining, right? When you have these control mechanisms or these things that we got to do, we have to be certain about things or to convince ourselves. You're creating a solid crystallized object, and that's what casts the shadow, right? So if you want to be free of shadows, you dissolve those rigid structures within yourself, become more fluid, and you don't cast a shadow anymore. And you do that by looking into the shadow. Well, there's a shadow here. Why is there a shadow here? Oh, it's linking back to my need to control this situation. Oh, okay. How does that make me feel? Oh, I'm kind of scared. That's why why are you scared? Well, I'm scared that like this bad thing's going to happen. I'm going to lose this or whatever. Why are you scared that you're going to lose it? Well, I'm scared that maybe I'm just not deserving of what I own and that's actually a real thing. It's called imposter syndrome. There's actually a lot of people that have it. Surprisingly, they don't believe that they deserve what they're given and that they're somehow going to be exposed and taken out, right? It's a very well-known psychological phenomenon, but that's rooted in this false belief, this false fear, right? And when you root that out, oh, thank you, shadow, right? You're able to pull that out and see, and then that dissolves that structure, and then you solve the root of the issue, right? The root of the issue is that we're casting these shadows, and then the shadows get darker, and then we polarize more, and as we polarize more, we switch between them, right? And you become blind, right? You can't see. We need to integrate those things, right? And that's really kind of what brings us to a state of happiness. And so these darkness, right? Another part of the negative energy to understand too is think about, negative is contracting, right? Positive is expanding. So, I'm trimming my hedge, right? That's negative energy, right? I'm trimming in. I'm making a marble statue. That's negative energy. Think about if a forest grew forever, like never stopped growing, never died. Would there be any space? No. Right? The negative energy clears the space for new growth. A good example of this would be the story of the rabbits. If you guys are familiar with the rabbits in Australia, this one guy took 6 rabbits to Australia because he wanted to hunt them. And he decided it would be a great idea. I think he killed 4 of the rabbits. Couldn't find the other 2. Then, a number of years later, there's no natural predators, no negative energy, right? Nothing to stop their growth. Then billions of rabbits in Australia, like an epidemic. Like they didn't know what to do with all these rabbits because they bred out of control, positively expanding, right? Took up all of the space. Think of cancer. It's positively consuming everything, right? But it creates a negative reaction, right? So the more positive, the more negative the counter reaction you're going to create, right? So it's not about positive thinking and it's not about negative thinking. Those are half truths. And the thing about half truths is they're dangerous because they can live on and not be seen, right? They can live on forever and not actually be fully understood because, or not be fully discovered because they're half truths, and we have a lot of those half truths. A whole lie is much easier to discover, but, positive thinking and negative thinking are both, half truths. We've got to understand negative thinking. We've got to look at things in that way, right? Sometimes you need to trim away a little bit of stuff. Sometimes you need a haircut, probably me. Just had to throw that in. But, sometimes you need the negative energy. And I've noticed in like situations where I'd have, negative things happen to me, like they kind of like catch me off of something, that I was going on the wrong way, and it pulled me in, or I have these negative reactions, to strip away all of those things in me that make me, like we're kind of fat, overgrown parts, they strip the false beliefs, all that stuff, that's why you sometimes get this shadow reaction with fear. You get the shadow reaction, with false beliefs, because they're there negatively to trim away at those false, right? So that you can clear that space for new growth to take place, right? So really happiness, like, is kind of just in that understanding, because at least for me, understanding the mechanisms of how it works and why it's there, and why fear is there and all of those things, then like I don't look at it as a negative thing, right? And I think that's the big difference, is like you can experience negative energy, which is the contracting, the discerning, the cutting, the psychic sword, the trimming, right? That's negative energy. Positive energy is just like the growth, the expansion, like you're so beautiful, oh, I'm gonna, help you blossom like a flower, right? But when you can learn to think in an integrated way, right, and look at it, then they're no longer good and bad. They're no longer like, oh, this is so unpleasant. You just be like, oh, hey, fear, like, what do you got today? What do you got to tell me? Oh, okay, another false belief. Thanks, man. I'm good now. And the more you do that, you don't have fear anymore. You defeat fear. Like, fear is there. But then the next enemy you meet after you defeat fear, clarity, because you receive a great clarity once you've transcended that fear. Once you've cleared all of those false beliefs out, you're harmonized with yourself. But then you get clarity, and clarity is your enemy, because you'll never question yourself. And when you never question yourself, then you don't have that negative, right, discerning question to chop away at things that are false, and you can get lost in another clarity trap, and then you'll become stagnant again, right? So with clarity, even especially when we receive it, you need to defy it as quickly as you receive it. Remember, I was talking the sphere, right? In order to perceive multidimensional objects, you can only get a cross section at a time, right? So, you can't get stuck on a cross section and be like, I can't let it go, because then you're not going to be able to receive the next and the next and the next and the next. So clarity, you could have that clarity for that cross section, but if you get stuck on that, you become certain that that is all that is, and you just become stagnant. You can't receive what's next, right?
That's really the key, Colin, that you touched on there, which is the
open.
When we're polarized, there is no movement. You look at like a magnet, for example, you're not able to continue to integrate the entirety of the field as a part of yourself and then move on to the next and the next. And we talked about being conditioned with all these belief structures, and the root, and this is just my way of thinking, but the root of unhappiness is that I have a belief, and whatever is in the moment, the actuality of what's happening doesn't match my belief. And that gap between the two is my measure of my state of unhappiness. And so, like I said, we go through our life trying to control everything to match our belief. And then, sometimes you get lucky, or maybe you're really controlling, and you can match your reality to your belief, and you're happy
temporarily.
For how long? Yeah. For how long? Like, 1 second or 1 day. And then it gets pulled apart because everyone else is
then
also holding their reality and trying to match it. So you finally reach this state where you're like, okay, I can't keep trying to control everything around me to match my belief. So what's the only alternative left? It's to make your beliefs match reality. Have the flexibility to flow with reality and close that gap
instead of trying to make them. Yeah, and so many people are trying to prove their beliefs true in their delusion and fear of that belief, like they're constantly fighting that and pushing that and constantly making themselves more unhappy and increasing that gap because they're trying to rearrange the physical world. That's the error. You don't rearrange the physical world. That takes so much work. It doesn't always work the way you want it to. There's so many other factors you can't control, like it just and that's what we all think we do. Like when I first started having anxiety, like a decade ago, like I don't have it anymore, like because me and fear are friends. But like a long time ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can feel it coming on. Like I'm going to go for a walk. Maybe I just got to be in a different room and I'll feel better, And like the only times I felt better was when I believed I'd feel better for doing, the whatever I thought that would make me feel better, But, you always like, we start thinking like, physically I got to do something. Physically I got to do something to change it. But like, that's the error. And then we're just kind of running around chasing that fear and we don't really realize, what is there. But like, when we face it and we turn around and we just, we do it from inside, it doesn't take very long. And it becomes like a really amazing process, and then you build a relationship with that energy and you look at it more as like, okay, this is the experience of like dissonance, just like, if I listen to a guitar that's out of tune, it's going to be like, it's going to make you cringe a little bit, but that's just what the experience is of dissonance.
And that's okay because like it leads you to look at it.
Yeah. It's just, you need to see it. So, hey, this is dissonance, because when you can see that dissonance, you can know that's one more window into who you are. That's one more window. That's one more way you can find out who you are. We don't get to find out who we are just like straight up. God doesn't be like, okay, you're this, this, and this, and this, and this. You get all these circumstances and mysteries and, lotuses that we have to, unpack bit by bit and moment by moment, right? It doesn't come directly to us, but like, that experience, takes us to new heights, right? When we can look at it, and so, that's part of the challenge too, because we experience this thing and then we believe that to be true, right? Try it next time. Next time you feel fear, right? Just stop for a second and just say, hey, what is it I'm afraid of? Blah, 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 blah. I'm afraid of being rejected. Why are you afraid of being rejected? Oh, because I'm afraid I'm not going to be good enough. Why are you afraid of not being good enough? I'm afraid I'm not worthy. There you go. False belief. Sorry, my daughter's been going through that. We've been having this conversation, and guess what? She made 3 friends today. She's not been able to make friends. She was afraid. We did the little. She put that into practice, man. And like now she's just like, I'm just nice. Girl, man. Like, you're awesome. One day, dude. She's like, what? That's possible. Yeah, girl. You're doing good. You're doing good. But try that. Try it, and try to look at it that way. And then it's gonna feel less like. Because like from my experiences of it, it's kind of like, why me? Why is this happening to me? That's always the thing that really like rubs us, like why are bad things happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? That's what we all think, right? And we think then it just reinforces that fear saying, oh, well, it must be because like I did this wrong, or maybe I'm messed up and blah, blah, blah. And that's the sickness that we get coming to earth, man. Everybody gets it because that's what they do to keep us enslaved. Right? When people think that about, they're constantly in a state of dissonance, so they're not powerful. And then, they'll do what they're told because they're afraid, right? And that's why we're told all of these things that are untrue, so that people perpetually get afraid. I mean, a lot of people, man, like in their 20s, they're just depression, anxiety. I see more people that probably have anxiety than not, to be honest, like from just my sampling of people on earth, right? Yeah. It's just.
And then I think if we look at the journey as being, you don't have to, try to be perfect and all in one day. It's a journey, and the journey never ends. Yeah. And no one's really above or better than anybody else. And you can start with just, looking at things that you don't feel so strongly about. You may have kind of a belief about X and Y, and what you can do is you can just practice letting go of the small things in your life. I'm not going to fight this polarity and defend my belief in this conversation. I'm going to try to pull back and observe it. And the other thing that does is it allows you to grant unconditional love to other people. So you're basically saying to someone else who has a different view, that it's unconditional, and you can be who you are, and I open the door for you to be who you are. And then I think it's going to, eventually lead to a world, we're in this mind frame as a society that we have to believe one narrative, or everybody has to think the same. We talk about like diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion, but the reality is everybody kind of follows the same thing. My wife was telling me, trends, the trend this year is, I don't know, black and white cupboards, and the trend with clothing is this, and everyone just, boom, they go down that path. And we're really kind of myopic. And as soon as we can let go and say, hey, it's okay for people to live their truth, of course, do no harm, but it's okay for people to live their truth. And it's okay for it to be different than you. And then you honor that, you celebrate the diversity. That's that sun I was talking about, where you're creating in all different directions. That's
Well, and
that's where decentralization is headed, right? That's the whole concept behind it.
And there's a big warning. I mean, like, not necessarily a warning, but there's a big push towards a light polarization agenda right now, right? Like, we've been kind of dark polarized for a while, but there's this big, there's forced equality. Like, you got to say the right gender identity, and like, you got to accept everybody, and they slap it in your face. Like, there's just this like forced equality agenda.
But that's also
right?
a control, right? That's the opposite.
Exactly.
Control.
That's what I'm saying. That's what they do.
That's
to create control.
That's not unconditional.
Polarize. When people, and I'm saying, like, that's what we're building, right? That center path. But what they're trying to do right now is flip the pendulum, right? That's, this progressive, they're even calling it woke, we're woke, like everybody's racist and whatever, and it's just like, it's just this light polarized agenda. And that's, that's something to just make sure that you guys look out for, is polarization, right? If something polarizes you, it's probably not going to take you to a good place, right? And if anybody suggests to force something, it's never genuine, like, people need to learn to love each other based on mutual respect. And that comes through experience and openness to that experience of one another, because people, I mean, they just can't, you can't hate someone. You can never hate someone. You can only dislike how they act. And if you truly, truly communicate with someone, not just like, oh, hey, I think you're a whatever and I don't want to talk to you. But if you really, truly communicate, you will find out they are just like you, and you can't not like them. So if everybody just had that, they'd find that mutual respect with one another. And that's the foundations of like the society that, is emerging, that need, mutual respect. Spending time with each other from that mutual respect, mutual joy, that's the bond of your family. It's of respect and joy. It's not of anything other than that, and that's something that needs to grow on its own naturally. Like, remember, we're that seed, we're that seed that's born in the darkness, and we're fighting, and we're actually just about to reach the surface right now. We're right at that point where it's just, humanity's about to, the gatherings are going to begin soon. Like,
there's this theory
that
applies directly to that. It's called social exchange theory. And it's demonstrated that when people can cooperate as opposed to competing, and there's a mutual benefit for both parties, that evolution actually progresses at a faster rate. You can look this up. It's called social exchange theory. And it's just the idea of really integrating duality and understanding true diversity without trying to control, the other person. And it doesn't matter if you're under the guise of, love and light, but you're really trying to say everyone needs to think a certain way, or everyone needs to act a certain way. You can just fall back and ask yourself, is it trying to dictate the way that the direction I think, or I have to go through a certain body in order to, to live my life? And then you can step back from it. You don't have to subscribe to it, despite what its appearance is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're just at about an hour now. We wanted to kind of start out I started it off. I don't know if you guys noticed, I was playing a little bit of piano. I wanted to kind of start it off to kind of set like a tone. So we're going to kind of keep that theme going, unless you guys object to it, just let me know. But like, figured it was a good, like, it's a part of me that I haven't shared too much with you guys. And so I want to, like, it's a nice little venue to do that from. And also, like, I mean, I learned to play music. Like, everything I played over there is just classical improvisation, and I just kind of write it on the spot. But I learned to do that just because I just couldn't ever hear that music that was like my resonance, like I could get pieces of it, pieces of Moonlight Sonata, pieces of Clair de Lune, I'm just like, but like, I learned to play music because it was like a way that I could heal, and create, peace, no matter what, where I was. So, that's just something that, I feel like it's time to start sharing with you guys a little bit. So,
Well, and
these
that,
podcasts we're
Colin,
going to
that
be
that goes
doing.
back to
Yeah.
what we said about just being who we are and learning to share who we
Yeah.
are with transparency and
Exactly.
practicing
Yep.
non-judgment. Just because it doesn't fit
Yep.
someone else's
Exactly.
expectation, that's their belief and that's
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
polarization.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's what we're doing here. Like I've kind of been in the spiritual closet, quote unquote, partially just because I didn't feel like I was ready. You know what I mean? I had a lot of questions that I needed answered myself before I felt like I could like really give those answers to other people. But like, I feel like it's time. And this is, these podcasts are going to be a time to really kind of get to know me and Tash. We're going to make them interactive. If you guys have any questions, just drop them in the chat. I kind of posted a message there, but we want to, have a theme for each one of these podcasts. So this one was focused on like happiness, and we kind of got into polarity because happiness is kind of a state of integration, right? But the next one we're gonna just pick continual topics, and it's not always going to be spiritual, right? Like spirituality is woven in everything. It's just multidimensional physics to me, right? Like spirituality to me is multidimensional physics, but we're going to touch on other pieces too, because the Age of Aquarius is also it's about the maturing of humanity. Right. It's the growing from a child to an adult. This is the first great year in a great year. So it's a whole, great year. And it's also a galactic year too. So we're coming on a 200 million year cycle as well. So we're converging on a lot of cycles. That's why there's so many things. It's like, finale going on right now. Right. But, the difference between a child and an adult, right, is discernment. A child can't think for themselves. They just believe everything they're told. But an adult can discern for themselves, right? So as we're growing humanity, right, and we're growing from a child to an adult in this new Aquarian age, especially we, have artificial intelligence at our fingertips, new propulsion systems, satellite technology. I mean, even the software-defined satellites that we're doing, that's new stuff. It's not been around before. So Brett, love is energy. 528 hertz, Brett, that's a resonance with Saturn. So if you take 1 divided by 432, or not, sorry, if you do 1 divided by the number of seconds of Earth's orbit around the sun, right, and then multiply that frequency by 2, that's going to go up. Every time you multiply the frequency by 2, you go up an octave, okay? And you do that enough times till you get to a legible frequency. It ends up being a C on a 432 hertz harmonic series, okay? Harmonic series just means the notes are rooted on the 432 cycles per second as the 4th octave A, okay? 432 hertz resonates with our Schumann frequency as well, and the orbit around the sun. But 528 hertz, okay, if you go and you do that same process, Saturn's orbit, the number of seconds of Saturn around the sun, 1 divided by that number of seconds, you keep going, you get it a C on a 528 hertz harmonic series. So 528 hertz is a healing frequency, and a lot of people throw that frequency around, but it's a resonance with Saturn. Right?
That ties in well with Age of
Saturn.
Aquarius as well, with Saturn and Jupiter's conjunction, right?
Yeah, the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, right? And,
yeah,
if anybody if anybody didn't notice, that's published a white paper for the Nexus Protocol on December 21st, 2020, at 11:20 a.m. and it's timestamped on Nexus right when that conjunction hit its peak. I was just timed it. I was like, I can't pass this up, man. It's like, had that for a few thousand years, got this paper almost done, like, gotta do it. But like the Age of Aquarius, I want like the maturing of the mind, right? To learn discernment. How do you learn discernment? You have to have something to discern, right? So what's a war for our minds? Why do you think there's a war for our minds? That's the eggshell, right? That's how humanity will learn discernment. You have to be fooled or attempted to be fooled in order to learn that discernment, to see that for ourselves. So all of this that's happening right now is the catalyst to this growth and this changing into, this new Aquarian age. But, it's so the Aquarian is also about technology, right? It's about the mental, the mind, the technology, the expansion of the mind, innovation, right? The inventor, water. It's the bringer of water, right? So naturally, we're doing this in a technological way, serious technology and research. We're going to do, new propulsion system designs, new battery designs, and other types of alternative things, and obviously satellite, cooperative satellite tokenization rings, so on and so forth, right? Just doing it through technology, because it's technology that's really going to take us to that next level, right? And when we start getting into space exploration and everything, right, like that's what's in our future, guys. Like this is a really cool time. I mean, it's taken a long time. Like it's taken tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to create this moment we're experiencing right now, right?
Yeah, and
So
all that
it may seem
disharmony that
tough,
we
but
see,
just
all that chaos that we see, that
it's
is the
important.
impetus that is driving this type of innovation, taking the power back.
Somebody asked if you could sing while I play piano.
I'll pass this round, but thank you.
Should I? I mean, I guess should we do a little piano outro on the way out?
Yeah, man, that was really nice
I don't know.
coming in. So
We'll play something. Well, my
take it.
microphone got all jacked because I have it hooked to my audio interface, and then I
Yeah,
started hearing it like playing. I was like,
move your chair though,
Tash,
so we can kind of
just
see you.
mute your mic, Tash, but you didn't. Like your mic was muted, and I found out that my audio interface had disconnected, so it was going through my computer and like all stuff. So, all right, well, I think
Well,
that was pretty much. If you have anything you want to say in the process while I'm playing, just go for it, man. I'm gonna probably play for like a good 5-minute outro, 6 minutes.
it sounds good. Thanks for everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you guys, and spread the word about this podcast. Like what we want this to really do is nourish. We want it to nourish your mind, nourish your spirit. Providing wisdom and sharing, and we love to have people come share some of their wisdom too. We can bring guests on the show and make it like a really cool, like let's share what we've learned and let's share our perspectives, and that I think will bring us all together a lot and give us kind of some sense in this madness. Right?
Yeah, so, I think Paul was interested in joining sometimes.
Yeah, we'll get
cool.
Paul on next time. Yeah. This one was kind of a quickie. We kind of put it together pretty quick, but I'll go play one more little bit of piano.
All right.
That's kind of a space that I can share with you. That's kind of where I come from, right? And this is where I build Nexus from too. That place. So
yep.
I hope you.
Thanks everyone for joining. We did integrate some of the questions, within one of the questions about individual transformation and needed to fit into a peaceful society and happiness. And I've collected some of the other questions, and depending on what the theme is, we can integrate some of those. You can also send some additional questions if you guys are interested. So we'll take it away, Colin. Thanks everyone.
That was rad, man. All right, guys. So I think this will pretty much conclude. Let me see. Thank you for joining. Yeah, and you, Aaron S. I think we're going to be doing some of this music, the beginnings and the ends of these podcasts, as a part of the nourishment. So if you guys have any requests or stuff, styles, feels, whatever that you like, next podcast we're going to kind of open it up a little bit more, have a little bit more interaction, and we can do a follow-up if you're watching this podcast now. If there's anything that we said that you'd like to either challenge us with, which we welcome challenges, love challenges. It's the fire, right? Or if you would like more clarification on anything, or you'd like to make suggestions, share your perspective. The next podcast would be a perfect place to do that. We'd like clarify. We're going to be kind of coming up with a theme of what we're going to be doing for the next one, which will be kind of a continuation. I mean, we want to bring a lot of that, technologically driven decentralization, but also, weaving together a lot of these philosophies that we can, work with to understand ourselves better, right? And understand why things are happening, which helps us make better decisions, which ultimately helps us in the pursuit of happiness, right? Because happiness is not about who you are, what you have, or what you do. It's about how you feel about who you are, what you have, and what you do. All you got to do is change that. You change what you see, you change what you believe, you change what you receive, and you'll be happier. So, until next time, thanks for joining us.